Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to be giving you my top 10 tips for beginners in Farming Simulator 25. So if you're completely new to the game, or even if you just haven't played much Farming Simulator before, these are the things I would recommend doing and not doing. Because Farming Simulator can be a pretty difficult and confusing game when you first start playing it, as there's just so many things to do and learn about. But the tips I give you in this video should make things a bit easier for you and help you get off to a better start. So let's get into it. For number 1, we have avoid downloading mods. And this is something that not everyone will look into straight away, but if you do click on the downloadable content page before starting a game, then I would suggest not installing any mods. Because there's already tons of stuff in the base game, and adding even more things to it while you're learning how to play will just make it more complicated for you. So yeah, just stick with the base game maps and equipment when you first start playing, then think about downloading some mods in the future. And to be honest, there isn't actually that many mods you can download at the moment anyway, but as time goes on, there will be tons to choose from. So this tip will probably be more helpful to those of you that get the game a bit later on. But either way, just avoid mods while you're learning how to play. At number 2 is start on new farmer mode. And when you start a game, this is one of the preset options that can be selected below the map choice. Farming Simulator 25 does have some new options to the previous games though, which are all of these down below. But if you select the new farmer preset, that will put all of these other options to what they would have been in the previous games when they wasn't available to change. And these settings here will give the game a good balance of being fun but still challenging. So I'd say just select the new farmer preset and leave the other options as they are. However, if you wanted to make things slightly easier for yourself, then you could up the starting balance. But if you do that, I definitely wouldn't put it up too high, as that will completely take away the challenge of the game. Then the other thing you could change if you wanted to make the game harder is the economy difficulty. And at the moment it's on easy, but if you put it to normal or hard, then you'll earn less from selling things, which will make it more challenging to progress. Although I would suggest just leaving it on easy for now, because you can change the economy difficulty at any time through the in-game menu. But apart from those two, I wouldn't change any of the other settings, because you definitely want to start a farm, as that will give you land, a farmhouse and all of the equipment you need to get going. Plus I wouldn't recommend taking a loan, as you'll have to pay interest on that every day until you've paid it back. And depending on how big the loan is, the interest can eat away at your money pretty quickly. You can take loans at any time through the in-game menu as well, so if you find yourself stuck for money at some point, you might want to take one out. But I'd try to avoid doing that if possible, just because of the interest. Then the last option is the guided tour, and this is something I would really recommend doing, because it doesn't take long and it will run you through the basics. So if you're completely new to Farming Simulator, that will be a massive help, as you'll learn how to do some basic things. Just beware that you can only do the guided tour on the Riverbend Springs map, so if you start on Hutan Pantai or Zalonka, you won't be able to do it. However, I wouldn't suggest starting on Hutan Pantai anyway, as the map is very focused on rice, which will be a pretty confusing crop to do if you're new to the game. Moving on to number 3, we have turn off seasonal growth. And when you start a new game, this will be on by default. So if we open the menu and take a look at the crop calendar, you'll see that there's specific times of year that each crop can be planted and harvested. And if you're new to the game, only being able to do things at certain times of year will just make it more difficult. Which is why I'd recommend turning seasonal growth off until you've learnt how to do things. And to do this, you want to go down to the bottom icon and into game settings. Then you'll see we have seasonal growth just here, which can be set to either yes, no or paused. But you definitely don't want to put it on that, because if you pause it, nothing will grow. And now I've set it to no, if we go back into the crop calendar, you'll see we can plant and harvest all of the crops at any time of year. So it makes it much easier for you, as you don't have to wait around before you can do things. It's just a case of planting your crops and harvesting them when they're ready. Also, when seasonal growth is off, you won't have to worry about your crops withering, which means there's no risk of losing your entire crop if you don't harvest it in time. In at number 4 is stick to basic crops. And the reason for this is there are some crops in Farming Simulator that are pretty straightforward to plant, grow and harvest, whereas others that are more complicated and require more work and equipment. So while you're still getting used to the process of preparing your fields, planting crops, growing and harvesting them, keeping to the basic crops will make things a lot easier for you. And the ones I would recommend new players doing are wheat, barley, oat and canola. simply because you'll have all of the things you need to do those on your starter farm, and you won't have to think about getting any new equipment. So yeah, just stick with the crops I mentioned for a few harvests and learn how to do those, then get some equipment to try out new crops. Although if you do start on Hutan Pantai, you will also have some rice fields and the equipment you need to do rice. But I would say just harvest the rice fields that are ready to make some money, then do the crops I said in your normal fields and learn how to do those first. Because like I said earlier, rice is quite confusing, as you need to flood the fields and make sure they're empty at the right time to avoid losing your crop. So I definitely wouldn't recommend planting it again straight away. However, if you did want to do rice in the beginning, I'd just watch a few videos on it first to make sure you understand how it's all done. At number 5 is check the prices before selling. And this is something that will help you make a lot more money, because everything in the game has different sell prices depending on where you sell them and the time of year. So if you open up the menu and go down to prices, you'll see there's a list of everything you can sell in the game, with a chart for them that shows the current sale price at each location. And at this moment in time, if I was to sell barley at the farmer's market, I would get £738 per 1,000 litre. But if I sold it at Goldcrest Valley, I would get £766 per 1,000 litre. So looking through this chart will help you find which location to sell at to get the best price. But if you want to make the maximum amount of money you can when you sell things, then you want to look at the graph down below, because this shows you the price fluctuations throughout the year and when the price is at its highest and lowest for what you're selling. And you can see here barley will be at its lowest in August, with the average price being £762 per 1,000 litre. Then in January it will be its highest with an average price of £1,137 per 1,000 litre. So if you wanted to make the most amount of money possible, you would need to wait until January before selling your barley. For number 6, we have don't rush into getting animals. And the reason for this is they are quite complicated and it can be hard work to take care of them early on. Because each animal has different requirements, with the majority of them needing things that you'll have to get lots of equipment for and do different types of crops. Most of the animals' productivity level depends on what you give them as well, so there's just a lot that goes into them and it can be very confusing if you're new to the game. And if you start on Riverbend Springs, you will actually have some cows, but I would suggest selling these, as cows are a difficult animal to have. Plus you don't even have the equipment you need for them to begin with, so you'll have to buy it. And to sell the cows, you can either go to this icon here and open up the animal dealer, or go into the shop and onto the animal dealer through there. But whichever way you do it, once you're on here, just go on to the next page, then you can select the number of cows you want to sell, which is 3, as that's what we start with. And you'll see these can be sold for £3,200. So just press sell and the cows will be gone, plus you've got yourself a bit of extra money. You can also sell their pasture by opening the shop and going into construction, then selecting it. And you'll see this can be sold for £7,500, so if you don't have any cows, you may as well sell it. Another thing you'll have on Riverbend Springs are bees, which are just over here. But I wouldn't sell these as they don't actually require anything, you just leave them and over time they'll produce honey, so they're extremely easy animals to have. The only other animal that's as easy to have as bees is a dog, because they don't require anything either. However, they are just a pet for your farm, whereas you'll actually make some money from bees. But if you did want a dog, then go ahead and get one. And now I think about it, you could also get some chickens if you wanted to, as they're actually very easy to take care of as well, because they only require food, and you can feed them either wheat, barley or sorghum. And you'll have all the equipment you need to get wheat and barley when you start out. Plus you can use your trailer to feed them, which means you won't have to buy anything other than a chicken coop and the chickens themselves. But if you do buy them, just beware that roosters won't produce eggs, so don't fill your coop up with them. Also, if you buy the younger chickens, you'll have to wait a few months before they start producing eggs, whereas the older ones can produce them straight away. But either way, if you want chickens, you can get them at any time, because what they require is very easy to get. And I would actually recommend getting some, because they're a good way to earn some extra money. At number 7 is spend your money wisely. And what I mean by this is don't just go into the shop and buy something like an expensive tractor straight away, because you really don't need it, as the ones you start with will be more than capable of doing what you need to early on. And you'd be far better off buying stuff that's actually going to help you make more money and progress further in the game, such as more fields and equipment. Also, when you buy things, just make sure you have enough power to use them. Because if we look at this spader, you'll see at the bottom it says 200 horsepower, which is the amount of power it requires. So if your tractor doesn't have 200 horsepower, then you'll struggle to use it, and you don't want to end up with equipment that you can't run. So just make sure to check the power requirements of what you're buying. The other thing I would suggest doing is looking on the used vehicle sale, because in here you'll find vehicles and equipment for much cheaper than they are new, so you can save yourself a lot of money buying things on here. And the vehicles and equipment do change round each day as well, so it's always worth looking on. But just think about what would actually be useful to you before you buy things, because if you get something then realise you don't need it, you won't be able to sell it for the same amount you paid, so you can lose a lot of money very quickly, which you definitely don't want to be doing early on. For number 8, we have lease vehicles and equipment, and this is basically an extension to the last tip, as it can save you a lot of money. But doing this can be very useful no matter how far into the game you are, because leasing things only cost a fraction of what buying them does. So if you just want to try something out, or even if you only need to use a certain vehicle or piece of equipment now and then, there's no point buying the machines in case you either don't like what you're trying out or you just aren't going to use them on a regular basis. And to lease something, all you have to do is open up the shop and select what you want. And you can also change the configuration options on things you lease as well. So if I wanted to change the engine setup on this tractor, I could. Then if you look at the bottom, you'll see it says lease and what button to press, which for me is square as I'm on PlayStation. So just press the button it says, and this info tab will come up showing how much it costs to lease. So for this tractor it will be £2,167. However, there are some other fees that you need to be aware of when leasing things, which is the cost per workday, and this is what you'll be charged for every day you keep something on lease. So for this tractor, it will charge me £425 for every 24 hours I have it on lease. Then there's cost per work hour, which is what you have to pay for every hour you use the thing you've leased. And that's £892. So if I was to use this tractor for 3 hours, it would charge me that amount 3 times. So make sure you check the cost per day and work hour before you lease something, especially if it's an expensive machine, because the more expensive it is, the higher the cost per day and work hour. At number 9 is customize your game settings, and this is an important one because there's a lot of settings you can change in Farming Simulator, and some of them will make the game either easier or harder. And to find these, you want to open the menu, go down to the bottom icon and into game settings. Then in here you'll be able to change lots of things, like the timescale to speed up or slow down the in-game time, turn traffic on or off, so if the AI traffic is annoying you, then turn that off and there won't be no AI vehicles on the road. You can also turn snow on or off, so if you don't want to deal with snow, then turn it off. Then the things here under crops and growth are the main settings that I would recommend changing, because these will have the most effect on how difficult the game is for you. So you'll see there's crop destruction, which is currently turned on, but I would say turn this off, because when it's on, if you drive over your crops they'll be destroyed, but with it off you can drive over them and they won't be destroyed. Then there's periodic ploughing, and if you turn this on, you'll need to plough your fields every now and then, or after doing certain crops. But if you don't want to have to do that, then leave it turned off. Next is fieldstone, and this means when you plough or cultivate your fields, stones will be dug up on them, which you'll need to remove. Because if you leave them in the ground and work over them, your equipment will get damaged. So if you don't want to have to remove stones from your fields, turn that off. Then there's lime required, and with this turned on, you'll need to apply lime on your fields after every 3 harvests. But if you turn it off, then you won't have to do that. And then we have weeds, so if this is set to on, you'll have weeds grow on your fields, and if you don't remove them, they'll affect the yield of your crops. So if you don't want to worry about dealing with weeds, turn those off. Next is natural disasters, and you can have these set to enabled, which means things like tornadoes will cause destruction to your fields. Then there's visual only, which means you'll be able to see the natural disasters, but they won't cause any damage. And disabled, of course, means there won't be any natural disasters at all. So I would say visuals only would be the best option early on, because then you'll get to experience the natural disasters without the risk of anything being damaged. And then the other settings I would suggest changing are for the AI workers, because these can help you save a ton of money when using them. So there's AI workers refill fuel, seeds, fertilizer, slurry and manure. And your best option is to turn all of those off, because if you leave them on, the AI workers will refill all of those things as they use them at a much higher cost than you can buy them for. But when it's turned off, they'll only use what you supply them with, and you can just refill the workers' equipment as and when you need to. The only options you might want to change at some point is refill slurry and manure, because if you have somewhere that store those things, such as a manure heap, you can actually set it so the workers will refill the manure from there, which is much quicker and easier than having to go and load it up yourself. Besides the settings on this page, you can also switch across to general settings, and in here you'll be able to do things like turn the help menu on and off, change your units such as kilometers to miles, adjust your input controls, so things like camera and vehicle sensitivity, or change your sound. So have a look through these settings as well, because there's probably a few things in here you'll want to change around. Now lastly, for tip number 10, we have do contracts. And these are basically jobs you can get paid to do for other farmers, which you can find by opening up the menu and going onto here, where you'll see all of the contracts that are available at the moment. There's always a few different things you can choose to do as well, with each of them paying a different amount depending on the type of work it is and how big the job is. But the reason I recommend doing contracts isn't just so you can earn money from them, it's actually because it's a good way to try out new things, as you can borrow all of the equipment you need for a very small fee. And you can see the machines you'll be using just under the map, which shows where the job is, with the cost of borrowing the equipment being on the contract information, which you can see the leasing cost for this one is only £200, so it's extremely cheap. When you start a contract, just make sure you press borrow items if you want to use their equipment though, because you can also press accept and use your own equipment to do them. But don't worry if you do accidentally start a contract without borrowing the equipment, because you can cancel them at any time. And to do that, you just have to go over to active and press cancel. Then if you go back over to the available contracts, you can start another one. Anyway, that brings us to the end of my top 10 tips for beginners. But hopefully the tips I give you in this video will help you out and make things a bit easier for you when starting out. And I will also be making guides and lots of other Farming Simulator 25 videos that could be useful to you, so keep an eye out for those. And if you have any questions about the game, just leave them in the comments down below. But that's everything for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know by leaving a like and feel free to subscribe so you never miss another video.